PowerHouse Smart Boot Camp series. Please, Darrell, join us away. We're so excited to have you as our instructor, a professional consultant and trainer yourself. We're thrilled to have you.
Great, glad to be here.
Okay.
You want to should we get going?
Yeah, I think we should kick it off.
Okay, great. Well, welcome everybody. Pleased to have so many people on board today, and I want to try to make this something that's an hour that's useful and beneficial and maybe even a little bit entertaining. I do want to say one thing before we get started. Because of the number of people we have join us, we think it's best if we can get you to not only hold your questions to the end. Technically, you can have questions anytime, but use the chat function within the Zoom functionality and submit your questions that way. And as we wrap up, we'll make every effort to answer or try to answer as many questions as possible. And with that, let me go ahead and get us underway. Well, here's the good old days. You remember these days, we used to go to meetings, we'd sit shoulder to shoulder with people, we'd enjoy probably candy out of the same dish and hobnob that way. And that was our yesterday.
Oops.
If you saw the Saturday Night Live skit last week, you may remember this. It's actually was funny, but a pretty good portrayal of what's really going on. If you look at the upper left-hand corner, the Addie Bryant, she's playing the role of someone who is totally lost. Kate McKinnon is in the lower right-hand corner. Same thing, two people that were first-timers on a Zoom call like we're on today. And if you saw it, it was quite funny. What we want to do is get you to a point, and hopefully you're already there, but maybe enhance your ability to get comfortable with the technologies that are wrapped around doing these type of meeting sessions. So this is the new normal, and frankly, I don't think it's just for the near term. I don't think it's just for the current situation. I think it's for the long term. I think what we're discovering is that this is going to be a very viable way that we meet with each other whenever we get together. And I think there's a historical precedent that I can share with you. Wendy, are you still hearing me?
Yeah, you're sounding beautiful, Darrell. Let me let everyone know, every time someone joins the meeting, Darrell's screen gets, so I'm going to lock the meeting. I'm just going to wait 1 more minute, and we are recording this, and I'm going to lock the meeting. And only you lucky 30 people are going to be, we have over 75 people who have signed up, but we have to lock the meeting so they don't keep messing up your screen, okay?
Okay, good to know. I'll keep talking while you sort that out. I just wanted to make sure that, and it's great that we have so many people that wanted to dip into this. So you may not know this, but a quick history lesson, that the telephone in the first part of the 20th century was not considered a power tool. It was not really part of the business tools of communication, even though the phone had been around for several decades. I think the first phones hit the market around the 1880s. But when it came to business, first of all, very few people or fewer people had telephones in their home, early part of the 20th century. And an office typically might have one phone. It might be at the front desk, it might be in the CEO's office. But if people wanted to do business in that era, they saw the person face to face. And if they couldn't get to them face to face, they sent them a letter through the US mail. And hard to believe, but even if it was an emergency or urgent situation, the telegram was considered to be the preferred way to reach out to people, not the telephone. The pandemic of 1918 changed that. People were more isolated. They were doing what I don't think they called it social distancing, where they were trying to stay apart from each other. And suddenly the phone became much more of an instrument of business to communicate. And from what I've read, it was interesting because people complained. They said, it's awkward. I can't see the other person. I don't know, are they finished talking? Can I start talking? Who's supposed to hang up first? There were a lot of pushback, but gradually the phone kind of got into the mainstream of communication. And from that point on, it became a tool. And if you think about the evolution of the phone on the screen to our smartphones today, 102 years later, we're still using the phone. We use it pretty prominently. And I really think that our Zoom, our meetings, such as Zoom and others, are going to be with us for a long time. So this is a good time to get even more comfortable with it.
Good point. Wow, that's a great history lesson there, Darrell.
Yeah, I'm into history, so I'll try not to get too lost in that stuff as we move forward. Look, on the screen right now, you're looking at some of the different ways that we can use video calls. We're using Zoom today. We have several choices, and I want to make sure that I'm crystal clear. We're not going to get into the technical side of any of these as we move forward. Although I will say that if you want to get more information about any one of these, a best place to go is to the individual sites, the WebEx, to GoToMeeting, the Skype, et cetera, et cetera. Almost all of them, at least all the ones that I've looked at, have outstanding videos, tutorials on how to use their particular platform. So I really encourage you to take advantage of that. In fact, we put together a resource list. Janet's going to send it out to each of you. In there, we've included a quick summary of, I think, the 10 or 11 most popular platforms. And then we listed the websites of several of these where you can go directly to those tutorials. Now, my advice, before we leave this part of it, my advice is that if you're working in an organization or if you have a client base that is using one of these, particularly like Zoom, like Join Me, or any of the others, then it is in your best interest to go check out those tutorials and to practice using them before you actually go to the meeting. And you can do that easily. I think all of these have, if you're not already, if you don't have an account, you can sign on for free. You can set up a meeting with a friend or a family member, or even set up a meeting with yourself and get online and take a look at how it operates. I think you'll find that most of them are easy to navigate, at least from my personal experience, but they're all a little different. And even if you're in a situation where you predominantly work with one like Zoom, and then someone contacts you and says, I want to set up a meeting and I use Join Me or Microsoft Teams, then same thing, go read about it. Go check out the tutorial and get a little bit of familiarity before you get to the meeting, so you don't end up like that Eddie Bryant or Kate McKinnon character in the video from Saturday Night Live skit.
So Darrell,
yes.
One of the things that our boot camp is going to offer is future sessions. This is boot camp 100, but I believe it's boot camp 300, where we're going to delve into the pros and cons of some of these other virtual platforms. So
wonderful.
That'll be great. Thanks.
I'll be on board for that too. That's wonderful. Thanks. So the other thing I want to share with you as I go to our agenda. So we're not going to talk about the technical side of the platforms, but we're sending out some resources to help you with that. We're also not going to talk about your role as a meeting leader. We're talking about your role as a participant. 100% of what we're going to talk about today is applicable if you're the meeting leader, but there are some nuances to leading virtual teams, to leading virtual meetings that we're not going to go into, but we're not going to leave you without resources. That very same listing that Janet's going to send out. We've also put down a couple of papers that help to describe how you can better lead virtual teams or lead the virtual meetings that you can overlay on top of this. If any of you are following me on LinkedIn, I'm trying throughout the week, I'm trying to collect different articles on how to lead virtually and how to run virtual setups and meetings. And so feel free to link with me on LinkedIn as well, and I'll share what I'm finding out there. But here is what we are going to cover today, and I'll let you read down the list. Tried to ferret out what we think are the most important or the key things that can make a difference. Again, our theme is how to project yourself, how to basically put your best foot forward when it comes to being a participant in a virtual meeting. Well, here's a picture of my setup in my workspace at home. Now, what I've done is make something that's comfortable for me. So this is not at all to be a description of what you need to copy to set up. Catherine Schauger's put out a tremendous article on how to set up your workspace. It's included, the link to it's included in that list of resources I've been referencing. But what I've done here is try to put together a space that is efficient for me. I am, as you can see in the center of the screen or the center of the desk, I'm actually running the connection through that PC. But I personally have a preference. I like to build my slides on my iPad and run them from my iPad. So I create a link between what you see in the center and what you see on the far left, which is my iPad, which is physically what I'm doing right now. And I like to have another screen open. If you've got it, it's great. You could use a phone. And what I'm doing here is I'm keeping notes, and I'm watching photo notes I've made to myself just off to my right. And I'll admit that the day that we did the photo shoot, I cleaned up the desk a little bit. It isn't always as neat or tidy. But as Catherine would say in her piece, in her white paper that she wrote, you want to make it efficient and make it work for you. And this is just an example of something that works for me. So let me talk for a second about what I think is the single most important element in making yourself look good in a video conference. That's lighting. Now, if you're an interior designer, if you're a photographer, if you're a videographer, you already know the importance and significance of proper lighting. And what I want to share with you is just a couple of tips that it doesn't take a whole lot to manage the lighting. And this is an example of these 6 photos of 5 that aren't so great and 1 that's pretty good down the bottom right-hand corner. It's very easy to, if you're not paying attention to lighting, to either have too much, too little, or improper. And I'm hoping you see the difference in the one where it says just right about how efficient that can be in displaying the individual. So it brings the individual out from the background. The background in this case is a plain green background, probably a green sheet, but it works well. And this was actually part of a video, and I put the reference on the screen here, and it's also in the list of resources that's coming out. It's a great little video about setting up lighting. So it kind of goes even deeper, or a deeper dive into where we're going. But let me talk about some simple things you can do.
So Darrell, just so you know, earlier we checked your lighting for you, and you're a little bit higher lighting when the picture is smaller. So that's a very interesting thing, because earlier it was just Janet, you and I, and your picture was way bigger. And now your picture is smaller. So it would be important for people to realize that when the pictures do get smaller, the lighting does modify ever so slightly. So just so you know, your lighting is a lot more washed on your face right now, which is a little overexposed, where it wasn't when you were bigger. I just wanted you to be that.
Excellent feedback. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to test things beforehand, and then some of the variables that happen during the actual meeting. I'm adjusting the lights that I can adjust without getting up to see if that helps any and make me come out a little better exposure. And in the photo on screen, same workspace, I took a step around to a different angle. What I've done is set up something that, and I used 100% of junk that I had around the house. And I'm going to share with you some things you can use. I don't think you have to go to any great expense to add lighting. And if you do, I've got some suggestions how to do it for a couple of bucks. But I happen to have a tripod, and I put a video light on top of the tripod. The idea is to cast some light on me. It sounds like, and I've turned that one down because it looks like we're getting a little bit too much. And I also have a secondary light. You can catch it just off in the middle of the photo underneath the lamp. I'll show you a close-up of that later. Because sometimes what I'm trying to fight is shadows on one side of my face, because what you can't see is directly behind where I'm standing to shoot this photo is a large pixel. And it can let in too much light sometimes and not enough light. But I'm always trying to play around with how to manage that with artificial. And again, I don't think you have to go any great extent. A little bit of light goes a long way. Here's some ideas. Upper left-hand corner, just a regular everyday desk lamp if you have one. I would recommend you take that, adjust the neck so it's pointing a little bit more towards you, but not directly towards you. Take out the bulb and check it. I would suggest a 40-watt or less bulb. Again, you're not trying to, first of all, we're not trying to build a TV studio, and you're not trying to put yourself under hot lights for a police interrogation, just a little bit of a glow on your face. And sometimes that type of lamp can do it. Another suggestion, the center of the page, would be to take an ordinary desk tabletop lamp, take the shade off, put in a low voltage bulb, 40 watts or less, let that cast some glow. Moving diagonally down the page, if you're looking at the lower right-hand side, that's just a flash from a camera. Now, if you have a digital camera and it has an external flash, you might be surprised to find out it has a video light. The top part is the flash. That won't do you any good at all. But that in the base of the piece there you see, that's a video light that can be usually adjusted. You might even have a digital camera that has a built-in video light. So you might check that. Moving to the left-hand corner, if nothing else, you can go to Amazon and these little video lights. You can find those for $15, $20. They're very efficient and very easy to get, and they're somewhat adjustable and they work well. And if nothing else, all of us have phones, and every smartphone made since 2014 has a video light. So if nothing else, you could take that phone and prop it up and put some light on your face. And I think you might be surprised and impressed to see what that does to help enhance your view and how you come across on the camera, which reminds me of something I'm going to bring up a couple of times. Test your lighting and test how you look on camera. You don't have to wait for the video call to start, for the meeting to start. You can do that anytime by just activating the camera on your PC, your MacBook, your iPad. Turn on the camera and sit down in front of it and just see how it looks and play around with the lighting. Before, feel free to improvise. I showed this was the now close-up of the picture that I had before. That base, I found that in the basement. It was some sort of scanner, like put your phone on top of it, face down, and it transfers photos. The piece just above it is actually a power pack for some sort of video game from a 2010 era Wii, and then the flash on top of that. So you probably have a lot of what you need sitting around the house that could work very effectively for you. And so scrounge around first, try some lamps, see what you can do, and I think you'll like the results. One thing that sounds a bit counterintuitive is be careful with natural light. Now, this is another setup, and this looks like a very efficient setup that someone has put together. You've got a nice clean desktop. You've got the PC elevated. We'll talk about that in a second or two. And it's right in front of a window, which you would think, well, what could be better to have that nice natural light coming in, glowing on your face? The problem is we can't control the sun. You might sit down 10 minutes before you're going to join a video meeting, a virtual meeting, and everything looks great when you test the look on your screen. And by the time you activate and actually go into the meeting, the sun's gone behind a cloud, or maybe the sun's come out from behind a cloud. You can't control that lighting. So I'd actually say if you're set up in a position where you can take advantage of natural lighting, wonderful. Just be mindful that it controls us. We don't control that light. So you're better off with artificial lighting. It also gives me a chance to talk about a big faux pas that some people make occasionally. Don't put the window behind you. Picture this room, but everything's turned around and the window's now behind the individual. That's really tough on the camera on your device. It's going to get washed out and you're going to disappear by the light coming in from behind. So just be careful about where those windows are. Try to manage that as best you can. And I'm often plagued by what we're seeing today by getting a little more sunlight into this room than I'd like to have, trying to use some lights to overcome that. Wendy, did you have something? I heard you.
I was going to say, we're getting a lot of light from the library room that you had right on you. So it's like you're a perfect example of what you're talking about.
Okay. But not a perfect example of overcoming it, so.
That's okay. Still,
okay.
You get it. You're the
All right,
best.
well, thanks. So I'm going to move on from lighting. I know Janet's collecting questions. If you have any, we'll come back to those. Again, I think lighting is just something that should not be difficult. It should not be expensive. It should be something that can actually highlight yourself. One of the things we're fighting against, which most of us, I assume, is unfortunately the devices we use don't have great cameras. I think one of the things that this migration to virtual meetings is exposing is that PC makers have kind of scrimped a little bit on the cameras they put in, never thinking they would be pressed into use as prominently as they are now. iPads do a little better, but PCs and Macs, not such great cameras. And so one of the things that you can do, lighting helps certainly, is you can buy an external camera. Now, again, I'm trying to think ways you don't have to go to extra expense. But as we move into an environment with more and more of these type of meetings becoming a way of life, you might want to invest in an external camera. They clip onto the top of your screen. They run off the power of your PC. They are much higher quality. It's like going from standard definition TV to 4K TV. The problem is good luck finding one. While most of us have been out buying toilet paper, a lot of savvy people have been out buying cameras. If you go to Amazon or Best Buy or any of the electronic outlets, you're going to find probably a 30 to 90 day wait to get one. But it's something to think about, something to invest in that might have some long-term return for you.
You know, Darrell, a lot of us are now doing these virtual meetings for people we've never met before, you know, potential clients. We're doing a virtual sales presentation. So, you know, it's not necessary to spend a lot of money if you've got the tools on your own computer, but it's really important just to take the time out and make sure, because this is your best foot forward and you really want to create that warm environment.
Yeah, if there was one investment, light, an artificial light, try if you have nothing else, but a camera would be something that would be very useful. And they're easy to use and set up. It's just right now it's hard to find them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let me take us to something else I think is well worth a little bit of discussion. That's background. There are so many, not just choices on what you can put as a background, but so much conversation going on about what's a good background and what's not a good background. So I wanted to share some thoughts that we've been batting around, Wendy and Janet and I, and get you to think about this. And this, again, I put the link at the bottom of the screen. This will be on your list of resources. This was a great little piece that this group put up on doing backgrounds. You can see what I would consider to be the 4 primary options we have. That is the natural setup. Here she's sitting in front of a room, apparently in her house, with all the artifacts and items. If you move to the right, upper right-hand corner, this would represent the can pattern, geometric, some shape, something that's got color in it. I'm not here to say which is best and which is not best, but this is yet another category of backgrounds that you can add. And the lower left-hand corner is what I call the somewhere else. In this case, the individual wants to be, I would assume, in Paris, or perhaps at Paris Hotel in Vegas. It's hard to say. And then the bottom right-hand corner is, that's the alphabet with Christmas lights. I find that interesting and somewhat eye-catching, but that would be like your company logo, or maybe your company logo in smaller form kind of scattered across the background. These are all viable options. And I think you should think carefully about which one is best and which one is best for the meeting you're attending, because what you attend at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning with your colleagues or your staff might be different than what you do at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday in front of a prospect or a group of clients. And each of these have pros and cons around them. One thing that I'll mention with these artificial backgrounds, that's 3 of the 4, top right, bottom left, bottom right. Again, the quality of the camera can come into play here. So if you don't have if you're using the built-in camera, even in an iPad, which is a bit higher quality camera, you're going to get some pixelization, which means as you move slightly, as I'm moving my head a little bit left and right, your face, your body becomes pixelated if you don't have a green screen. Now we're getting into the whole technical side of TV production, but a lot of the play, even Zoom, somewhere in their fine print says they recommend you put a green, that's a physical green screen. That's a screen that would go up behind you. It would cover the entire area. It's going to be your background. And it's green, so you have to go get that if you don't have one, and I doubt many people have one sitting in their closet. That's probably the most effective way to use a artificial background. Otherwise, you get that pixelization. But again, you should think about each of these. Let me show you. I picked, right, here's Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon, Steve Colbert, all the late night hosts. Now, obviously, they're going for that I'm at home look. I mean, they're calling their shows, you know, Tonight Show from home or whatever. So they very definitely want to have the home look about them. Which is fine, which is fine. I mean, the fact is we're not trying to hide the fact we're working from home. I was interested in, from the Today Show, Savannah Guthrie, who's been working from her home, apparently in upstate New York. They don't identify the town. And for a couple of days, they put the New York streetscape behind her as if she was sitting in the studio. Well, that's fine. I found it a little bit deceptive. She's sitting at home and they're trying to make it look like she's sitting in the studio. But you know, maybe it's not a big deal. I think that you should decide what's the look you want. If you are going to go for the natural look, and today you can see I'm sitting in a room. I've got a bookcase behind me. That's fine. I think what you should do is just think about what's in your background before you make that your background. So make sure that you tidied up, so to speak. Make sure that you've removed any items that might be distracting or even provocative. I have to say, even though I'm sitting in front of a bookcase, when people use bookcases as a background, it seems to be a very common thing to do. I have to say, I'm busy trying to look over their shoulders to see what's on their shelf.
Well,
I can't really see over Stephen Colbert's shoulder here, but some would say, hey, that's a distraction. Best
so
there.
here I was going to say, I'm so glad you took down the picture of your wife in the behind you that was there yesterday. When
You saw that before, huh?
she is a beauty.
Yeah, I think it's worth spending a minute standing in front of what will be your background and just saying, does that look good on camera? And then take a couple of selfies too. Again, if you want to use an artificial or a canned background, that's great. Think about your audience. Think about who you're going to be meeting with and what would they think is appropriate or not appropriate. And, you know, just me, I would err on the side of being a little bit conservative.
Right. And again, as I had said here, Darrell, it depends, again, like you said, who you're speaking to, but I conduct a lot of interviews online with candidates who are looking to be placed and to earn a career opportunity. And it surprises me every time how lack of consideration of their background when on these interviews, despite some other things that you're going to mention today. And again, if I were a professional and we're talking to somebody who I was hoping going to hire me to be their architect or designer or builder.
Yeah, Wendy, I'm sorry you cut out there for a second.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I said same for all of us who are professionals who are, you know, actually talking to new clients. But like, for example, next Tuesday, we're having speed networking, which is going to be an interesting concept here for PowerHouse Smart. For PowerHouse Smart members and guests can purchase it. And people are going to be on the screen with their camera and communicating when muted, as well as being put into private rooms with someone else or multiple people. And so their background is going to be very important, but just keep in mind, this is a 5:30 to 7:30, so it could be a little more playful.
Yeah, that sounds like a good event, absolutely. So let me sum up a couple of tips on backgrounds. I say keep it simple. You're looking at Tom Hanks as he was hosting Saturday Night Live last weekend. Keep it simple, whatever it is. I would avoid loud colors, and that goes to your artificial background, or your setting, if it's your natural setting in whatever room you're working in. And I would avoid harsh white backgrounds. If you have a room, somebody said they were doing, maybe it was Catherine said they're doing these from their laundry room sometimes because it's the only space where they can set up. But I try to avoid, very washed out colors, and arrange your background to suit you. Now, someone else argued that if you don't want to tidy up your background, then move your camera, tilt it. I'm tilting me a little bit right now to show you that that can work. We talked about provocative items that you think others might find provocative, even if you don't. Careful for backlighting. We talked about the sunlight. If you look at the photo of Tom Hanks and look off his right shoulder, you're looking at their cooktop, and there must be some light over it. It's not a big deal, but it caught my eye when I was watching and when I captured the screenshot. That was just a little bit distracting to have a bright piece of white wall sitting like that. So just be careful about where things are backlit and how they're illuminated. If you're a photographer, you know about this. It's called the rule of thirds. Think of a picture being in 3 equal thirds, left, middle, and right. And people don't often think about this, but if you position yourself in between the thirds, so either you're sitting between thirds 1 and 2, or between 2 and 3, as opposed to just putting yourself right in the center in zone 2, you stand out more. It puts a little pressure on and makes sure that background is up to snuff, because more of the background is going to show off of one side of you or the other. But a photographer will tell you, a professional photographer will tell you that it draws the subject out more. And so you stand out more if you're paying attention to the rule of thirds. And then I've mentioned a couple times, shoot a lot of selfies. Shoot a lot of selfies when it comes to lighting, when it comes to your position, when it comes to your background. Get things set up the way you want people to see you, and then snap some selfies right off the camera that's on whatever device you're using, and go look at them and say, this one's better than that one's better. I think that it's the best way to test. And then Wendy's bringing out a good point already today that despite my efforts to control the lighting, the size of the screen comes down. So one of the things I should have been doing was reducing those photos and seeing if it made a difference. And then the other thing I want to point out is notice how Tom Hanks is dressed in a suit, coat and tie. I doubt if he was hosting in the old normal on a given Saturday night, and we could go back and probably look at the times he's hosted. I suspect he was dressed much more casually. He's wearing a suit, and I know it was a punchline. He had a joke somewhere in there, but it's the first time in 6 weeks he's put on anything but a sweatsuit. So it's part of a punchline, but I think it was a bigger statement. I think it was a statement that this is time to turn up the volume, to tune up when it comes to how we treat our attire, which takes me to my next topic. How are we going to dress? Wendy, you've got a great little theory on sort of a meter of how well you should or should not be dressing. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it goes something like, if a delivery came to the door, would I be willing to open the door to take that delivery? And if the answer is no, I don't think I look right to open the door, you're certainly not looking right to be on a video call. And if you feel like, yeah, I think I passed the threshold, then maybe you're getting closer. But I think the rules on how you should dress should not be changing just because we're in a world now where we're using more video conferencing. You know how you would pick out your attire if you're on your way to meet a client. You know how you would pick your attire if it was a Saturday morning, you were going to meet someone for coffee. You know the rules. There's nothing new here. Wendy just talked about people who are candidates for positions. Again, these rules are not changing. They're not different. I think you should be dressing appropriately. We've heard all the jokes about not wearing pants, tumbling out of bed, throwing on a sweatshirt. This is the way we're meeting people for business. It's the way we're meeting people socially. I think we need to be dressed appropriately. If someone sends you an invite and says it's casual Friday, so put on your ratty sweater, fine, if that's the ground rule. But my rule of thumb has always been, if I'm going to err in my attire, I'm going to err on the side of being overdressed. I'd rather be criticized for being too dressed or overdressed for a situation than not. So we're seeing a lot of different opinions on that. We're seeing a lot of different examples, good and bad. But my advice is that really nothing's changed. It's the same professional ethics that in ground rules we've always lived with. When you agree?
I agree completely, and I have to say some funny stories. When I'm doing these interviews with these candidates, and one person had bedhead, most people, they don't even think to put makeup on, but this morning when we had our coffee meeting, Rebecca, Janet, and I were bright and early, and we're all like, we all put makeup on, this is great. It actually made us feel better. It made us feel like we were going to work, and that's really, we're all in this together. We don't want it harder for us to have video calls, but we're just trying to give tips and ideas, and we all have funny stories. I'm sure we could all record a video call where you were just hysterical.
I think, and those examples are out there, and hopefully some people who are the culprits will start to make a transition. I don't mean to be disparaging Homer Simpson, by the way, if anyone's offended. I don't mean to say he's a slob, but certainly not the first thing you think about when you think about dressing professionally.
Right. Absolutely.
You may have noticed, I want to talk about eye contact. You may have noticed, this goes back to that photo I showed of my workspace, the arrow that I had sitting on top of the PC. And now I've got a little bit of enlargement. That arrow is pointing right at the camera. So here's the problem. Cameras are in one spot. We're used to being in meetings face-to-face, shoulder-to-shoulder. You make eye contact with the person that you want to make eye contact with, usually the speaker, someone you're addressing, the room at large if you're talking to everyone. The issue here is that if you're looking at a screen, right now you're looking at my slide, but if you're looking at a screen with all those happy faces of attendees, there's a tendency when you're talking to one person to look at their photo, but you're not looking them in the eye because you're looking away from the camera. So I try to remind myself where the camera is, and because that's the best way to try to make eye contact. If I'm talking to someone whose picture is in the far lower right of the screen, I'm trying to avoid looking down there. I'm trying to remember to make eye contact with them artificially through the camera. Now, one of the things we have to deal with is where is that camera located? So certainly you want to find it. 8 times out of 10, it's probably at the very top center. We were talking earlier about Dell makes a wonderful laptop, the XPS 13, all types of bells and whistles, and for whatever reason, they put the camera in the very bottom of the screen. So wherever you position yourself, basically people are looking up your nostrils. And iPad, I love iPads. I work almost exclusively on my iPad, but I work when it's in landscape mode, so turn on its side. And for a video conference, that means the camera's on the far left-hand side. So anytime I'm looking at the screen, I'm not on my iPad right now, I'm actually, what you see is me looking away off to the right. So I always have to remember to look over to my left and bend my neck and things like that. So being aware of the camera's positions. Now we got the second problem. The cameras are not great on many devices. Hopefully that'll get better with the next generation. And the cameras are sometimes in an awkward position. Now, one of the things you can do is the second photo I share with you down the lower right is you prop up your device and make it eye level. So it's more natural to be looking straight ahead at it. I use books. You may have to experiment with what's the right height, the right combination. Books work. You could use, if you have a stand, we saw that photo earlier of that MacBook propped up on a stand. That's great. But experiment with that and see which one puts you in. Again, use your selfies. Take your selfies to find out. I happen to use, just for fun, I'm going to show you, Chambers' Book of Great Speeches. It's 996 pages, just happens to be the right height for what I need. So I prop it under my PC for situations like this. Webster dictionaries, if you're old school and you still have a real live paper dictionary, works very well, but it might take a couple books. Tabletop or coffee table books are best because they're broader and you reduce the tipping potential. So I encourage you to look at that. And then let's talk for a second or two about some common distractions. UPS, FedEx deliveries, the dog barking at UPS, FedEx, DHL deliveries, and the kids are everywhere. My advice is to take whatever steps you can to minimize your zone. So you're isolated as best you can from things that might be distractions. But I don't think anyone can totally manage this away. And if you think about it, again, going back to the old normal, if you were sitting in a meeting in your home office, in your office, work office, there were distractions then too. Somebody comes in, needs to pull someone out of the meeting, someone has a message for you, someone gets a call, they forgot to mute their phone. We've had distractions from day one in business. There's nothing new about this. At home, they're different. You've got pets, you've got children, you've got more activity going on. I think people are cognizant of that. I don't think anyone's going to say, I'm not doing business with you because your dog's barking. I don't think people are going to say, I hear your doorbell ringing, so what's wrong with you? I think we're all of an understanding that these things are happening. You just want to take what steps you can to mitigate as much as you can, as best you can, any sort of distractions. And worst case scenarios, and this is one argument for, we've been talking a lot about using your iPads, your PCs. This is one argument for using your phone. Actually using your phone right now to tap into this, and maybe some of you are. The beauty is it's so portable. If there's a distraction in this room, maybe you can just grab your phone and move down the hallway to another room, or walk into the garage if you have to, wherever the case may be. So manage distractions, but don't get carried away, because I think people, all of us, are trying to be very accepting of this is what our current normal is.
Right, and Darrell, one thing I've done is I've gotten very comfortable navigating the platform, so that if for some reason something's going on behind me, because we live in a very small place and my husband works from home as well, is I've learned to be able to put on my picture whenever I need to be conscientious that something's going on behind me, or mute myself if I know that I'm going to be hearing something. So just getting comfortable with the tools that you have, so that when necessary, you can mute yourself, you can move your phone. And as you had said earlier, a lot of people are using their phone to join virtual meetings. Be sure you're comfortable with that, because I've had many candidates who do this and they're sitting in their car underneath the L in River North and the L's going by and I'm having an interview with them on their iPhone, and you can clearly see that they're sitting in their car. So just be really conscientious of how to use the tools, where you are, what might be happening. And especially since a lot of our Zoom meetings are short. They're shorter because we get across our content. So okay.
Good points. And that's a great segue to what is my last major piece, and then we'll open the floor for questions we can try to answer. Just in general, projecting yourself. And the lead off topic, the very one that Wendy was just addressing, one of the two, when possible, it's a video call, so be video. There should be a good reason why you don't want to be on video and just audio. And I know there are some reasons why, but whenever possible, as often as possible, if the meeting organizer, the person who set the meeting up, felt that an audio call would work, then they would have set up maybe an audio call. Let's make the assumption that people set up video calls because there's reason why they want to have people visually on board. So try to go video whenever possible. If not, a fallback would be what Wendy just suggested. You can put up a static photo of yourself, so at least you're visible. Think about this. We're talking about projecting yourself in the best way possible. If there's 8 people on a video call and 7 of them have their faces up on the screen and yours is not, like it or not, you're kind of becoming that forgotten person until there's time for you to talk about something or share a point, ask a question. So again, think video whenever possible. What we talked about before with the tire, I broadened that out, just everything else in the world. You're already professional. You've always been professional. Continue to be professional when it comes to being part of a video conference. Play by the rules. What I mean there is you're doing it today. We knew because of the volume of people who were joining us, it'd probably be best to have everyone on mute, submit your questions by using the function to chat. So play by the rules. Don't be the one that breaks the rules and says, I need to get my question in, or I need to unmute. That's the job and actually the call of the meeting organizer. Remember, today we're talking about your role as a participant. And then when it is time to interact, yield to others. This goes back to 1918. I read the article about the people that said, it's too strange. I don't know. What if the person starts to talk and I start to talk? I don't know what to do. I can't see them. It's the same issue now. If you start to say something and someone else starts to say something, then you should be the one to back off. You should yield, give them the floor, wait for the next opportunity to talk. Otherwise, you get that back and forth. Will you go? Will you go? Will you go? Just be the one that says either fall silent and let them continue, or to yield to them in some way. Always speak clearly, loudly, but not too loudly. Again, you can test how you sound before the call with the audio. At least on Zoom you can. I can't say that for every platform. Here's a biggie. Assume you're always being watched. I know that when you're in a setting like this, and I'm not even talking about multitasking. I mean, if you're going to be looking down at your phone, if you're going to be looking off somewhere, we all have different ways we multitask. Just remember that unlike when you're in a traditional meeting where you're sitting around a table, not every eye is on you every minute. It's very possible that every eye is on you every minute. So whatever you do, just want to be thinking about, I'm being watched. And the more you focus in on that, the better that'll serve you. Maintain your posture. Don't slouch. Don't get too comfy just because it's a long meeting. Or again, you're forgetting that people may be actually looking at you. Your nonverbals are more important than ever. Again, because your nonverbals are on display. So in the past, where someone may have said something and you would catch the eye of a colleague across the table and smirk. Now everyone's going to see you smirk. So just be careful about that. Take notes. These are still meetings. This is not specific to a virtual meeting, but don't forget you're in a meeting for a purpose. If you are a note taker, then take notes. If you're not a note taker, think about taking notes, because the exchange of information is different. You can't just stop often and say, tell me more about that point. And by the time you get that opportunity, you may have forgotten you wanted to get some sort of amplification of that. So take your notes. It'll serve you throughout the meeting. And then get familiar with the benefits and the limits of the technology. There's a lot of great technology. There's a lot of things about this that still have kinks. Just try to understand what's a benefit and what's going to be a limitation. What can you share? Do videos work? If I want to show you an example of this, can everybody see your screen? Think about those things ahead of time.
So Darrell, my favorite about the lesson of be sure that you assume everyone's watching you is don't take your camera and your computer or your iPhone into the bathroom.
Like Katie Bryan on Saturday Night Live, you saw the skit, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
It's happened to me before that people have done that. So please just excuse yourself, mute your cameras, let everyone know, and be conscientious of where you're at.
You're saying you've actually experienced that with somebody.
Oh, absolutely. And then the last thing I was just thinking while you were talking is it would be awesome if we could get a shared smaller group meeting where people could share how they're doing their video meetings with clients, presenting mood boards and all of that. I would love to see some of the interior designers or architects on the board, or even the builders who are meeting with clients to get them to make selections, because that's taking what we're talking about here, Darrell, what you've so professionally shared with us, and taking it to the next step. You're just talking about us talking. What about us actually doing the work that we do, which is presenting and getting people's input and whatnot?
Absolutely. Good point. Well, let me turn this over to Janet, who's been collecting questions.
Great. Janet?
And let's,
let me unmute her. Janet, you're unmuted, my dear.
Hello, everyone. We have been having some side conversations going on here.
Good.
And the first question that was posed was, what's the difference between a large virtual meeting and a webinar? And when should you be sharing your screen? Always? Never?
Okay. So I think a large meeting versus a webinar. A webinar to me is a canned session. And by canned, I mean it's a presentation that's been put together that's going to have probably a large audience, where it's more for the information of the participants, not necessarily intended to be interactive. A large meeting could have just as many people, is where you want to try to bring in some more interactivity. We're kind of a hybrid today. We're just a little bit too large to say, let's have open mic and everybody just jump in. But we wanted to make sure that we had room for some interaction to get what we're doing right now to answer some questions. Where if it was a webinar, it might end right now and we'd say, thanks for joining us. If you want more information, here's our website, feel free to contact us. I think to me, that's kind of the definition between the two. And then the other question was about sharing your screen.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think, number one, that really stays in the domain of the meeting leader. If you have something you want to share, the meeting leader can, on most platforms, and again, we're thinking Zoom right now, this is somewhat universal, the meeting leader can allow that to happen. And then you can share your screen. So you want to ask if there's something you want to share, can I share that now? Otherwise, I don't think there's a way on most of the platforms I've worked with, but I might be wrong, just to kind of jump in and say, let me put this up on the screen. You have to do that in conjunction with the meeting leader, organizer.
Great. So Janet, are there any other questions? Because I do want to do a quick poll.
Yes.
So I'm gonna launch that poll, and here's the poll. By the way, it says, what is your preference? Do you prefer camp classes? And again, this was the 101, the 100 level, big picture, a lot of common sense. We get it. There's a lot of other, you can go to YouTube and get a lot of the information we just gave you, but we just thought we'd have some fun and kind of share with you some of the best practices that Darrell actually uses in his professional training classes. And so the question I have here is, do you prefer boot camp classes that are offered on, it shouldn't be speculative, it should be saying consecutive days or weekly. So that's a typo. It actually was an auto typo. That's supposed to say consecutive. So the answer are, I prefer virtual sessions on consecutive days. I prefer weekly sessions. It depends. There's no hello. It depends. I will want to access the recording, or I will never listen to the recording. So we just thought if you just take a quick gander, make your choice. I'm going to launch it, even though I'm embarrassed with some of the typos, but we're among friends and family. It's our first poll. So that's the, so just answer the poll questions if you got a moment and let us know. The next session that we're going to be doing is definitely going to be a lot more in depth as far as Michael's going to be teaching us next Thursday, next Friday, the 24th. He's going to be teaching us, and so I'm going to share my screen. He is going to, I'm not going to share yet. So I'm going to stop sharing because I want to see the poll answers, and we're going to end the polling. And it looks like people do not prefer consecutive days. They prefer weekly. It just depends. And they do want the recording, which is good to know that we have recorded this. So I'm going to share the results with all of you. And in the meantime, I'm going to share my screen so that you can all see the upcoming PowerHouse Smart events. And the big one that I'm so excited about is this speed networking that's going to happen. So there's the end results. You guys see the results of the poll. Thank you very much. helpful. This is the PowerHouse Smart website. And as you can see from the website, I was on the website. So let's go back to the website. Something happened, and I'm on the home page of the website. I go to the events calendar, which is right here for you all. Here we are at this basic 100 level camp. Next Tuesday is virtual speed networking. And you'll get some, if you RSVP for this, you just go to the website, there it is, you just hit register. If you're a member, it's complimentary. If you're a guest, it's $75. And we'll be conducting a really, really fun way at 5:30 to 7:30. And then the next one after that is gonna be that crash course, which is Boot Camp 200 with Michael Norpel. And I see people are exiting, so I'm going to say goodbye. We have the happy hour. We have another online coffee meet and greet. We had one this morning that was awesome. So take a look at the events calendar. Thank you all for joining us. It was fun seeing you. It was fun being together. Darrell, thank you again for your time.
Thanks for joining us. Yeah.
Some of the fun little laughs. Everybody have a great day.
All right.
Thanks.
Take
Bye.
care. Stay safe.